Today's video is going to be learning a technique called Smackin Acetate, and you use it with watercolor paper and some markers, and it will give you this nice multicolored background, and I'm going to show you how to do it. It's very easy. You start with 2 pieces of transparency paper, okay, so you set one aside, and then you take your piece of watercolor paper and you're going to draw a basic rectangle just around the edges of it, because this will be the perimeter of what you're going to color in. Now today I'm using certainly celery and wild wasabi. What I do, and you can vary it up however you want, is I kind of go in stripes that go sideways, and I try, you don't worry about not filling it all in completely. Leave room for the wild wasabi. But as I have experienced in practicing this technique, you're going to want to use more of the subtle colors, the lighter colors, than the darker colors that have more pigment in them. Because if you use too much of the dark colors, that will override the lighter colors, and then that's all you'll see. So I'm trying to focus more on using the certainly celery, and then I will fill in a little bit with the wild wasabi, but not a lot. So I'm almost done with my certainly celery stripes. Now remember, the paper's going to go in between it, so it's okay if you have a little bit of, if you run over the sides. Okay, now comes the wild wasabi. Okay. And just lightly color in the areas that you left blank. If you overwrite it, that's fine. That's why you want to start with your lighter color first, and then move on to the darker color so it won't mess up your markers. And if you use the side of your marker, yes, it will squeak like that. It's okay. It's not hurting the marker at all. Okay, the next up, I'm going to set this aside because normally I would spray this away from my desk, but for the purpose of this demonstration, I need to show it here. Okay, so you're going to spray your watercolor paper and get it fairly wet, like 6 squirts or whatnot. Set that aside. And now you're going to spray your stripes. And you're going to want to set it aside for, or just leave it there for a few seconds so it can kind of start to blend the colors without you doing anything. Now you want to make sure that when you spray the water that you use one that has a fine mist and not one that has a big mist, because otherwise you'll get water droplets and then it'll look a little bit odd when you're pressing it out. Okay, so now you flip the wet side of your watercolor paper down directly onto the stripes. Okay, push it down, and then put the other piece of acetate paper over it. And then you start to just smush it. And what I do to make sure I smush it even more is I use my bone folder to push it down. Now I'm using the watercolor paper from Stampin Up because I find that it is actually much better at spreading the color around as opposed to some of the stuff you'll find in normal craft stores. Because when you flip it over, you can actually push color into places that you want it to be. And you can push, if you've got too much dark, you can kind of push it off of the paper and blend it in with the light. And you can do that until it's diffuse enough that you're happy with it. Once that's done, go ahead and peel back the layer. And if you find you have a little bit of excess water on it, that's okay. You can just use a tissue to blot it off. And you can use a tissue, just wipe off the water from your transparency paper. Set that aside. Now you're going to set this aside to dry before you stamp on it. And what I recommend using is Stays On ink. I stamped it with the Elizabeth stamp that's currently in the Idea book and catalog, and then I used the Thanks from the Celebration set, So Happy For You. I then raised that up on some, oh, you can't really see that, on some Stampin' Dimensionals, and I had cut out the middle, and that's the technique. So good luck and enjoy!